today's times, the dynamics of functionality at a personal or a professional level has ushered a huge need for robust life skills that can help every individual to cope better with the numerous pressures and challenges, as well as with competence to face the realities of life. In other words, when we talk of life skills, we are referring to the abilities for adaptive and positive behavior that can effectively combat the demands and challenges of everyday life so as to address a good balance of three things: knowledge, skills, and attitude. We are an All India Women Task Force for Life Skills, and we endeavour to reach every single corner of the country as time goes by. We want to be able to make that positive difference to every working woman, regardless of which sector she belongs to. We want her to feel capacitated and empowered with her life skills. We are here to make a difference and do our little bit selflessly towards a Sashakt and Atmanirbhar Bharat. Jai Hind.
Hi, Veena. I'm not hearing anyone. Is anyone speaking? I'm not able to hear anyone. Is anyone? seems to be a problem. Hi, everyone. Purnima, and uh, I have with me today Miss Mahi Bala, who is responsible for legal and corporate governance at Access Healthcare, and she brings with her nearly 22 decades of experience and expertise in the legal world. With this, I would like to invite Mahi to speak about her experiences and her journey with a specific focus on the life skill of critical thinking, for the simple reason, as you are aware, Wiki is the vision and mission of Wiki is to integrate life skills into the day-to-day working of the women, and to, as was just shown to you in the presentation, to encourage women to sort of really foster these life skills and help them in their growth path, both from a personal and a professional perspective. With that, I would like to invite Mahi to please speak. I'm sorry, I'm having some connection issues, but give a quick, small introduction of how you think. First, just let us know about your journey, how your journey from where you started in 2002 as a High Court lawyer in Chennai, and have actually worked with a lot of companies in multiple roles in the legal sphere, and now after nearly 2 decades, you are heading the operations at Access Healthcare with a specific focus on how critical thinking as a life skill has helped you come to where you are today. Thank you, Mahi, and over to you.
Thanks, Purnima. Thanks, Wiki, and everyone for giving me this opportunity. I'm glad that I've been able to choose a topic which is creative thinking, and since like Purnima indicated, let me start off about my journey, where I started off, and where I am today. My journey goes way back to 2002. That's when I graduated out of my college. And as every other lawyer, the first experience that I kind of tried out was, to start practicing at the Chennai High Court, which was for a very short stint for about a year. The basic idea of joining as a practicing lawyer was to get a hands-on experience and see how the court life for any lawyer is. And as you would know, like Purnima indicated, 2 decades back, if anyone who is a law graduate gets out of the college, the more option that anyone would think of would be to become a lawyer, a practicing lawyer. Unlike today's world, the corporate world was a very minimal was at a very minimal existence at that point in time, or I would rather say a very rare opportunity that you will come across. So I wanted to get the base to see how practice at the High Court would be for a professional lawyer, and that's how I started off. But right from my college days, I think I was very clear at one thing, which was that I wanted to enter into a corporate world, and I wanted to achieve something really at the corporate world. I made my first move by joining into a company called Integrated Enterprises, which is a financial participant. So basically, they deal with shares and all of that stuff. And, that was a first base from a private sector perspective, or I would say a private company perspective. A very junior law officer, reported into a HR. They didn't have a team, but they wanted someone who could handle all their consumer cases. And, they had a lot of leases. So they wanted someone who could handle all of those things. And I jumped in and helped them. Um, you know, I think one of the added advantage for me, and the reason for choosing this topic about creative thinking, was right from this time I started my journey. From a corporate experience perspective, most of my learnings have been on my own. In sense, I would probably be the first person who would, be managing the department. So there would be no leader, or there would be no precedent for me where I could take a lead on. So most of it was like I would have to establish, I would have to stabilize, and I would probably create departments. So which means The thinking capability had to be really, really, strong and really different, right? And there was no one there for you to teach how things work. There was no one to tell you, okay, this, for example, has to be, done this way and all of that stuff. So after, again, a very short period of a year and a half with integrated enterprises, I moved into my first MNC, which is Pero Systems. Again, a very, very junior person at the organization, started off as a legal executive, which is the first level in the organization. I was there with an organization for about nearly 6 7 7 years. Scaled up to the level of assistant manager, again a one-man army. When I began the department, kind of ran around the entire organization, worked with a lot of stakeholders to set up the department. In fact, run around to collate all the documents, understand what it is. And for me, MNC experience was certainly very, very new, because that was the first time I'm entering into a proper corporate world, and that experience was entirely new. The reporting at this organization was into a CFO and a managing director. For my age and my experience at that level, reporting into senior leaders of the organization, always had to keep my thinking thoughts more proactive, right? Like, for example, if there is a problem that's put in front of me, and if I'm asked to work around the solution, most of the time I take a solution and go back to them, and I've ended up in a situation where they'll have 10 questions more on the solution that I kind of gave them. So what happened at that point in time is, you got to think out of box, you got to think way differently. You had to think about that 10 questions that would come up on your solution, and start creating responses to, or solution or answers to those 10 questions, right? So thinking capability had to be really, really, really strong, as you're working with the senior leaders in the organization. It started off there, and I think from there, moved on to Dell. Dell, I stepped into Dell as a part of Pero acquisition by Dell in 2009, and I was there with Dell for another period of about a three and a half year. A complete different experience, because Dell is a mix of ITS segment and a manufacturing setup as well. So I got to put my hands on, in all sectors. While I was working with Dell, I had an opportunity to work on the manufacturing piece of the business as well, and then also the IT segment part of the business while I was working with Dell. A very, very innovative place. A whole lot of thanks to my manager at Dell, who is currently AVP at Wepro, which is Bhavani Padmanabhan. She just gave me such a free hand. And, all that she would tell me is, you have things on your plate, you work around, you find a solution to it. If you're stuck, if you're really, really stuck, and if you're not able to move, that's when you reach out to me. Now, just assume having bosses like that, what will happen? You start creating things, you start working around the problem, you start finding solutions. And she said the only motive or the aim that you have to have is, you are here to facilitate business. Just keep that in mind, right? You got to aid the business, and just think about solutions that could help enable business to run operations. At no point in time, the legal department should be a department which just says, oh, statutorily you're prohibited from doing this, or you can't do this because this is not allowed. That's not what a legal department here is for. A legal department is an enabler. So think of things that could help you, enable and push operations smoothly, that they're not stuck. No one should come up to me and say, I'm stuck because Mahi is not approving it, she's very rigid, this cannot happen, and all that stuff. So that's when you really start thinking, right? Now, there's a certain way set of doing things, but how do you find navigating ways of getting it done? I think that's what creative thinking has helped me in those spaces. And all of these things have come, probably with the experience of working with the senior leaders, where you have to keep your thought level up to the senior leaders, right? But at a very, very beginning, or a very young age of starting your career, and or you have a manager who's like, you figure out this is your problem, come to me. You really, really stuck a roadblock and you think you can't move, but you should have exhausted all your options before that. Now what do you do? So you really have to think out of box, you really have to work through the solutions, and you really have to be a business enabler, right? And I think that's where creative thinking, played a lot of, you know a lot, it was a lot of help. And creative thinking, I think if you have to link with some of the wiki life skills, just does not stop with that one particular life skill, right? I think it actually adds up to two or more, three life skills as well to it. Like, I can effectively link it to problem solving and effective communication. It's not good enough if you kind of, think, have a very creative thought process, or you kind of coming up with a different solution to a problem. You got to effectively communicate it to your stakeholders and make sure that your stakeholders agree that the solution that you've provided is good, right? So it kind of covers effective communication and also the problem solving, life skill. I think that way,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I am very happy that I was able to choose this particular topic, which kind of, covers two other three life skills of wiki as well. And
Absolutely. So, yeah, so Mahi, just to sort of take the thread of this conversation further, first of all, I must apologize. I'm in a very remote area and I'm having some signal issues. So, initially I had a little bit of a hitch in getting connected properly. Now, Mahi, what you said is so interesting. As a lawyer, creative thinking, I would say, is extremely critical. So for me, creative thinking is critical thinking in terms of me as a lawyer, and I'm sure you'll agree with that. So
totally
let's start with the first role that you had, which was the role as a lawyer in the High Court. When you're standing in front of the judges, you know the feeling, you feel the flutter in your stomach, and you've got to articulate your thoughts very well. And
right.
that's when the creativity for a lawyer really begins, because everyone knows the sections. Everyone knows that in this law this is the section and this is what you have to refer to. But how you have to refer to it, and how you can refer to it better than someone else, or ensure that the way you are looking at it is the right way to counter any other argument that will come. So I think creativity, while we lawyers are considered to be very dry when it comes to our sort of our skill set and how we are sort of perceived as people, no fun, all non-creative, very boring, just look at the sections, just read your books. So do you agree with me with that? And tell me your experience as a high court lawyer. What did you think? Do you agree that we are very dramatic and creative, actually, if you really come to that?
No, I totally agree, Purnima, and I think you would also vouch for it, right? I think two qualities that probably a lawyer think is very, very important is logical reasoning and your interpretation, right? Like, interpretation differs from person to person, and logical reasoning also differs from person to person, right? Now, you take a solution, how do you think about, you take a problem, and how do you think about the problem, and how do you interpret the particular issue, and then kind of start working on the steps in terms of how do you solve it, and then put a logical reasoning saying that why this problem or this step has to have this solution, and then this step has to have this solution. I think that's something that's phenomenal for lawyers, and I think all lawyers obviously have to have it. Like you said, when you stand in front of the court and just refer the section to the judges, he's not going to appreciate you. He's going to ask you for what's the interpretation, what do you think of this particular clause, and why do you think that this has to be this way, or I have to give you a judgment in favor of whatever you're arguing because of the representation that you've given, right? So unless we put our creative thinking, or probably the critical thinking, which is also an aspect of creating creative thinking, is what I think, and then kind of build the entire story and tell that, I'm giving you a story, you got to believe it, and then give me a judgment in my favor. I think unless that happens, I don't think we're going to be able to win any case at all. And
Now
I
tell
and
me, Mahi. Yeah, sorry.
no, go ahead, Purnima.
So, Mahi, now let us, considering that our audience may not necessarily be legal, let's understand how you have seen this translate. So, we'll kind of break it up into three parts. Your role, because you have had a very, very broad experience in various companies, in various levels. You started as a lawyer to begin with, which is absolutely different from how, you would be working as an in-house counsel. As a lawyer, we as the external counsel sometimes give our opinion and forget about it, and we say, oh, you deal with it.
Yeah.
How you want to tell your business, you deal with it. If we're putting a spoke in the wheel, you deal with it. But you have to then deal with so many internal stakeholders, convince them that, okay, this deal that you've really been hankering after and that you believe is the best deal for your company is actually legally not correct, or may have certain risks which are legally, you would not advise. Now, that is not something that is going to be very pleasing to their ears. So you have had to go through all those roles, where as a junior, you were probably only dealing with the HR, etc. But now you've progressed, and you're talking to the board level directors, and you're telling them. Now, do you believe there is enough creative thinking out there when it comes to the junior roles? So we'll break it up into your experience in junior roles, in your middle segment, and in the senior roles. So as a junior lawyer who had just come from court, and when you started talking to the HR, etc., now you had to be creative to make sure that your role your requirements are justified. What you can do for the company can go a little beyond just the legal interpretations, etc., and help them be an enabler, as you rightly said. So in that, did you see that sort of creative thinking there in the women, especially the women workforce at that level?
So I think, let's again break it into two, Purnima, in terms of my experience and what I see with my team today, right? I can probably give the visibility from both perspectives. So from my experience, if you ask me, when I started working with integrated enterprises, I think there was very less opportunity for creative thinking, because there was a routine set of things that was laid down, and, you just had to do it. And, I think the creativity probably was, you had 75 leases, no one had a tracker, then you probably went up and said, okay, let's create a tracker, because if someone is going to ask when this lease is going to come up for renewal, then you have something there which you can just open up quickly, refer, versus going, looking for the documents, picking up. Okay, creativity was only to that level. And I would tell you, at certain junior levels, we always have this inefficiency in us that, what will happen if I go say something and people don't like it and strike it down? Will I ever be able to, present my views in future? Or, that kind of, thought process always keep running into my mind. And we are so hesitant to, move forward and, talk what we want to talk. Probably our ideas could be superb, it could sometimes be amazing, wonderful, but we always have that inhibitions in us that, should I say this, should I not say this? I think that was there up till certain level. And I think moving on to Pero, my point there was that I had to report into a managing director and a CFO pair. So the first few years, I would say first couple of years, I wouldn't talk much, I wouldn't say much, because they are the senior people who are running the organizations. And you're such a junior person right now. You just take instructions and start working. But what happened over the point of time is, now, like I said, when you go to them, they give you a matter to handle. And then when you go back to them and say, okay, I've handled this, here is what I think, this is how you have to work on this particular problem. And, here is a solution that I think is viable from a statutory or regulatory perspective. Now, what they would come back and say, well, I have this question further. Okay, leave apart the statutory. Are there other ways that you can manage the statutory aspect of it? Now, how do you get through it? We as an organization have to keep moving, right? You can't stop. Now, that's when you really have to start thinking. Today, for my team, what I do is that I have a team of 5. What I do is that I just call upon the team members and I say, we have this problem, we have this issue. Now, let's sit, discuss, come up with thought process, ideas, see what happens and how do we have to solve it and all that stuff. But at that point in time, when you're a single person who's running the team, what happens is you have to start thinking. You have to think, okay, if I go and give them the solution, what are they going to ask? Are there follow-up questions on this solution? Now, if I hit a roadblock, what is the other option that I have that I can go back? So for any issue or a matter that comes on your hand, during my stint with Pero, or be it Dell, or be it the current organization, I've never been always able to just give one option and convince people. You got to go with multiple options, and you got to have a business case as to, which option you suggest the best. But for convenience purpose, I have laid down two, three other options as well, which is something that you would agree, because what you do, right, as an external law firm, when we come to you, you would say option one, option two, option three. Here are the risks that are associated with each of the options. Best suited for the market is option one, probably because of these reasons, right? I think internally we've done it a lot, or rather, I've done it a lot, and I kind of have, practiced that a lot. And that is because of the set of people that I work with. They're so creative that if you go give them a solution to a particular problem, like I said, they will give you 10 questions out of the solution that you provided to them. Now, imagine what kind of ability you need to have if you have to work with that kind of, people. What I see in today's generation or today's people is they're very forward thinking. They talk a lot, but there are a few people who think about a lot of ideas but hesitant about coming up openly and saying it, especially when you call it in a forum. But if you kind of have a one-on-one conversation with them, sometimes they are open, they come up and they tell you and all of that stuff. The preference today is just have a one-on-one conversation and talk to you. But I think we always have to keep pushing from the lower level, give them that little bit of free hand and say, this is project assigned to you, you work, you do it. When you hit a roadblock, come to me. I think that will kind of help them, develop the creative thinking, right? Because you're giving the project and you're saying it's your baby, start handling it and all that stuff. That's how I learned it.
Right. So, Mahi, my question to you then is not from a legal perspective, because you interact with people across the board, senior management, etc. Do you believe organizations are doing enough? Actually, I'll just take another question before that. First, do you believe that creative thinking is definitely going to help women progress in their career from a junior role to a senior role and thereafter? Because see, a lot of problems are in the first rung of the ladder. Many women drop out. They don't really get what they deserve, or they feel they're not getting their due share. Do you think they can really make a niche for themselves, a place for themselves, if they bring in this creative element and think out of box, think creative, give more to an issue at hand purely by applying creative thought? And the second question that comes from that is, do you believe organizations are doing enough? Do you think there is not only from a legal perspective, because of your experience with other groups, do you believe enough is being done and this has been recognized as an important skill set?
So, to answer your first question, I think yes, because there is a recognition that always happens when you have a creative thinking. That is like when you have out of box thinking, when you have a different approach to a problem than what everyone else naturally have. You kind of stand out in the group. And, I think that's what we talk to a lot of other team members all the time, right? Across the organization, not very particular to legal department. What we say, think out of box, think different. Even when we do your even when we do performance appraisal for people and all of that stuff, one of the criteria that sometimes that we check is that how does this person approach problem. A lot of time, is there out of box thinking? Is this person having a very orthodox approach, or does this person think very different from what others think? So I certainly think that creative thinking can enable people to move up the career ladder faster, especially for women, which I think we should start pushing. To answer your second question, are organizations, doing good? I certainly think that there is a lot more that organizations can definitely do in this regard, which means push women to, start looking at the creative thinking, start thinking out of box, not have a very usual approach or orthodox approach to any work, right? It's a skill basically. So any kind of work that you do, instead of doing it on a regular routine basis, if you can think out of box and create a solution which probably helps you achieve a better result, more productivity, or do it faster, I think it's always a welcome approach. So organizations, I think, are trying their best, because most of the organizations have this diversity and inclusion stuff, and then they start pushing women to come up, think different, see how they can enable the life skills, like how Wiki is doing. Each of the organizations also have something called as a diversity and inclusion department or a club. So I have a club that runs within my organization called My3, which predominantly concentrates on seeing how we can develop some of these skills for women within the organization. And we kind of have to push. Not all segment women come out and talk. So if you ask me from my organization perspective, there are two kind of women that I see. One is the data entry type of people who just come to office, look at their regular routine stuff, just do it. But there's other segment, the call center piece, they're just extremely opposite, right? So we have to kind of keep pushing them to come up and learn some of these life skills. I think organizations are doing it, but we continue to strive to do it better.
So Mahi, that's a very good observation you made, and why am I going on about the first rung and going up the ladder, and importance of critical of creative thinking, and how important the fostering of this skill is. The reason why I'm talking about it, this is because you obviously, there's so many lawyers, but you come up the ladder. You have come up the ladder, and you have obviously got some some very specialized skill sets, which are different from academic or professional skill sets, which are, we need to recognize that there are certain skills we need to develop within ourselves to give us that little play area where we are going to be better than the next person. So the reason why I'm asking this from a trying to map it with your career growth is to sort of put a definition out there or an example out there as to how, when you were a junior lawyer, how you tried to imbibe the creative thinking in you, and when you came to the middle segment where you came higher up in the hierarchy, you had to probably be creative, but in a different way. There your creativity would have also included interpersonal relationships, managing different leaders. Managing leaders is another very important aspect. Relationship management is another aspect. So what are your thoughts around creativity in, or rather creative thinking in the leadership space, when you have come up the ladder, you've come to the management segment, and then how do you, and especially for a person like you, in so many organizations, during your work life, you probably have had to adapt to different cultures. You see, so work cultures differ from organization to organization. People differ from organization to organization. And being a lawyer within the organization, you're the fulcrum. Everyone will come to you. HR will come to you. Board will come to you. Everyone will come to you. So, from a interpersonal relationship perspective, how do you think creative thinking helps?
So I think this is where, Purnima, I was just telling you some time ago, what is very important is not just creative thinking. One, first and foremost, I think even before getting into it, first and foremost, right, you got to build in that kind of comfort within your leaders or your stakeholders or your board, anyone for that matter, that if we approach this person in the legal department, you're definitely going to get a solution. Now, what kind of solution it's a different thing, right? So how do we want to solution it is a different thing. But first and foremost, the thought process or the comfort that your stakeholders need to have within you is that you definitely will find a solution to the problem. I think that's very, very important for you, because that is when people are going to approach you with any kind of issue. Now, first, when people come up to you with an issue, there is a regular routine thought of handling or seeing the issue and saying, okay, this is what it is, this is what you can do about it. And, say and shut it out. But how creative thinking helps within the leaders, when leaders come and approach you itself, they come to you with a very crucial or a critical matter or a matter that needs urgent or a more strategic approach, right? So that is when you exactly have to, put your thought process. So they place something in front of your table, give the facts. Now you have to ensure then, okay, listen, don't worry, we're here to work around on this, and I will find a ways and means of it. Now, after you start creatively thinking a solution to the problem or putting a different approach and say that, okay, if we approach this particular problem through this way, we might be able to solve the issue. But however, we have a few hiccups here and there. Let's see how we can work around those hiccups and, get away with it, and then kind of, put together and provide a solution to it and work around this, right? Then there has to be a very effective, that's where I said some of these go hand in hand. You know that there is a problem, you thought something different than what you normally could work through because your normal option doesn't work on the current scenario. Now you've kind of think that you laid your problems, you've found a solution to it, and you have to effectively convince your stakeholders and your counterparts or your peers or your leaders, saying that here is a problem, here is a way of approaching it, there is a risk, but don't worry, I will ensure that I take care of this from a legal perspective, and this is how I can get it covered and kind of, get this matter solved, right? I think those are different ways of approaching it and kind of working. And it definitely matters of how you work with the leaders in terms of giving the solution to them. And that's where I again go tell them that, okay, I found this out, here is a solution, let's just work it out. Doesn't work. You just sit, convince them. Like, for example, if I can talk about my head of HR, he's not someone who will get convinced very easily of any solution that you give. If I go to him and give a solution, he will ask me 10 questions out of it, and he'll say, what will happen to this, what will happen to this, how do we handle this, how do we handle that? So he's someone who will have 100 questions, and there sometimes what happens is when these 100 questions come out of a solution that you're creating, which is a different solution, right? It's not a normal solution. You kind of tend to lose out and say, okay, fine, no, chuck it, you just go with your regular routine, right? That's a normal tendency. But if you can hold yourself a little more and say, kind of be more patient and say, okay, no, let's work through this way, let's work through this way. If you hit something over here, I'm here to help you out. If we find the issue here, I'm here to help you out. Let's just work together and get it done. I will cover it up at every phase for you. I'm there at the back. Don't worry, go ahead and do it. I think that's what gives them more comfort, even if it is a different, different way of solving a particular problem. Yeah,
Very
I
interesting. Very interesting, Mahi. Just want to just add one little, one more question while we are still talking about creative thinking in the middle management and senior management. Mahi, since we are talking about life skills and we're talking about life skills specifically for women at the workplace, I want to understand from you: do you believe that there are inherent biases that we face at the workplace? And I'm not just going to talk about, and here it's across all sectors, across all roles. And do you believe creative thinking for women at the workplace will sort of help ease out those biases? You can overcome those biases as a result of your approaching the bias very creatively. Do you believe, and from your experience, can you share some tips on that?
certainly, Purnima, I think I believe that, and I think for the benefit of the audience and everyone over here, I think out of the leadership that we have at our current organization, which consists of about 14 people, there are just two women leaders sitting on the top, among the leaders. Out of 14 people, there are 12 men and two female. I know the proportion doesn't actually fit in while we talk so much about diversity and inclusion and all of that stuff. But we are able to get there, and I wanted to specifically bring that point out is because we are able to get there because we had somewhere stood out to be different from the normal crowd, right? There was something that the leaders of the organization saw in us that was very different from everyone else who are there. And I think that probably is a creative thinking, the way you work, the way you approach a particular issue, matter, or project, whatever it is, right? It's not always a matter or a problem. So I think it could be a project, how you approach a project, how you work through a project, or how you work on assignment that's given to you. Everything matters. So I think there's something that is very unique that people just generally see when you kind of move up the ladder. I think, of course, creative thinking definitely helps, and it kind of will get you placed at a lot more places because you definitely stand out to be someone who's different than anyone else, right? Like 10 people talking about a similar solution, but you having a creative thinking, talking about a very unique solution makes you stand out as a different person. And as you start developing it, it kind of builds in a lot of life skill as well. Like we were talking about it, you are able to solve a problem in a much easier aspect. Your approach to a problem or a issue or a matter itself would be very different, right? You don't approach it in the same manner or aspect that someone else would look at it. So that itself kind of sometimes change. And when you do all of these things, and if you have to sell your idea to someone, then there is a very effective way of talking and communicating that has to happen for you to sell your idea, right? Otherwise your idea or your creative thinking is not going to help you, right? So I think there are some of these skills that come together that help you. But of course, I think if you have one, it just adds on to three other skills, which kind of helps you to stand out as a different and a unique person. And I think that obviously helps people to move up the ladder.
Wonderful, Mahi. That is very interesting. Now, with all your experience, I think you'll be able to give us some guidance as to how to develop this skill set. Now, one way, of course, is to be a very aware individual, a very aware professional. And as you are going up the ladder, you sort of imbibe this skill in you. But then not everyone is so gifted to understand, it cannot be apple to apple for all individuals. So
Right.
what is most important, and I think the guidance from people like you who have achieved and who have come to that situation where you recognize the importance of this skill set. I think guidance from you as to how to cultivate the skill set of creative thinking in particular, since we are talking about that today. How do we actually get there? How do we recognize what creative thinking is? How do we get, bring it within ourselves, inculcate it within ourselves? And also, do you believe that professional guidance, for example, joining a course or joining some sort of in continuous investment in yourself, be it monetary, time, or energy, is very important for professionals? Just getting a job or working is not the end of it all. It has to be a continuous growth. Do you agree? And also, as a closing, since we're running out of time now, as a closing, do you believe that focus by organizations like Wiki, where we are not only looking at, the importance of skill sets, we are also looking into how to sort of adapt it into the day-to-day working through effective policy recommendations, etc. Do you think we will be able to make a difference? I don't think there is much happening out there in terms of understanding the needs of women in the workforce from a skill set perspective. I know I've rolled in too many questions into one, but I thought before we end, I'll give you the space to answer all these questions. Thank
Sure,
you.
certainly. So I think a couple of points, and I think I've been talking about some of these things while I've been, answering some of the other questions right now. Analyzing a particular matter or a issue or a project or assignment that's in front of you is the first and foremost important aspect when you come to a creative thinking, because you got to analyze what is in front of you for you to further think about what needs to be done. So analyzing a particular issue, it can be anything. Right now it's not necessarily something that has to be work related, it can be a personal front also, right? There is a problem that we face from a personal life perspective also. So always analyze what's the issue, concern, matter, or whatever is in front of you, and understand what it involves. Now, when you understand it step by step in terms of what it involves, what happens is you start putting together solution for each of it, and thereby you're getting to a problem solving situation, right? Now when you start working through it, and then you put that, and you get across, and you know that you're trying to solve a problem, now you start rethinking that if each of these things that I've put through, will it is this something that is workable? What are the risks that I'm exposing myself off from thinking in a different way and trying to solve the problems in a very different way? Now you're convinced about all of these things, I think your next step is effectively communicating or effectively executing, right? You got to organize it in a structure where you think that the solutioning, which is a different thought process, a different thinking, is structured in a very organized manner and effectively communicated or effectively implemented. I think these are some of the skill sets. While I'm sure all of us have the skill set, it's about how we put to use, right? To answer your second question, it's about how we put to use too. Now we can't, and not everyone has that capability of thinking differently, or having a creative thinking, or thinking out of box. Right now you have to start practicing it, and as a corporate world today definitely needs people with different thought process, different experience, versus just going by the routine unique way of functioning or unique way of doing their work. So I think when you kind of put all these steps together, we would eventually achieve to the creative thinking stage. And it's not something that just comes overnight, and I would say it's taken me 2 decades to really go back and think when it started off and how I developed it, and today how it just comes off. And it's not that today I can do it all on my own, but there is some piece of it, but I always take help from a lot of team members. If there are problems and solutions today, what we do is we just call upon everyone and say, come on, let's discuss. You tell me how to handle it, you tell me how to handle. Sometimes sitting in a group and working with each other also probably could give you a different perspective of how you want to do things. And that's how you might be able to push a lot of people from your organization that you see come up with different ideas and say, okay, this person is having out of box thinking, maybe this person stands out, and we'll see what more and how more we can enable it. Now coming back to these life skills being very important, and how wiki's been working through to see how we can enable it. I think every organization probably will have to join hands with Wiki and see how they can internally include this into their diversity and inclusion, and see how they can specifically, promote a lot of women within the organization to develop these life skills for them to grow up their career. And Purnima, like you initially started off, right? A lot of women get dropped out even before they move to probably the second stage in their career, right? Because they have a lot of other commitments, and they start building families, they say I can't take care of. But I think today it's all changed now. In our organization we've created something called as home pod, where we are specifically saying that these home pods will be for women who have family and who are not able to come to office and take jobs, can sit at home and do their work. Today with the pandemic that's hidden, right, we're enabling a lot of women to just take up jobs, sit in their place and do those jobs and all that stuff. I think for those kind of people, if we can join hands with wiki and we can do something, I think that will be certainly great, because it will help them move up, and I'm sure someday everyone would want to come back and start working.
1 second. Yeah, Mahi, thanks. That is very interesting. Great insights from you today. There are some questions, some comments and questions actually from the audience. And I will just pick up a few comments because there are some questions and some comments. But I'll first start with a question which is from Kuljit. Is there a creative process that can be acquired? I think you've partly answered it, but if you would like to add that.
No, I think the creative process, probably the process is what I lay down right now. You have a problem or a solution in front of you. How do you start analyzing it? How do you start working through to see what could be the solution, structure the solution, organize the solution, and effectively communicate the solution? I think to me, at this point in time, I think that's the process that we can build on. There could be few more steps that we could fit in here and there, but precisely, I think these are the major steps that we can have in place to come up with a creative process.
Thank you so much. And I just read out a comment from which is very interesting. It says process that we're talking about, Sivambika has very clearly mentioned, understand the elements involved, analyze, think alternatives. Out of box thinking leads not only to creative thinking but also problem solving. So she has iterated whatever we have sort of captured in this conversation very beautifully, and I think that kind of sums it up about how to
Right.
become a creative thinking person. And I think a lot of investment, as you rightly said, has to go into each one of us, by us, and the environment that we are working in, and which is where organizations like Wiki, thought processes that we are trying to bring to the fore through policies, etc., really will make a lot of difference. And I think it's time we understand the importance of having the right skill sets, and understanding that with the right skills within us, which are fostered well by the environment, we can really go to the next level as professional women, not just professionally, but even from a personal growth standpoint. I think with that, I will thank you, Mahi, today for giving us your wonderful insights. I think this was a very, very interesting sort of conversation, not just from a wiki perspective and from a skill set perspective, but also for me it was a great learning from an in-house counsel who's done so well for herself. Congratulations on your wonderful journey, and thank you so much for being a part of our event today. Thank
Thanks,
you.
thanks,
And I would
thanks,
like to
Purnima.
thank the
Thanks.
audience. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Purnima. Thanks for moderating the session. I know, in fact, when someone approached me and we did have the conversation, said that I should be probably moderating and ask you the question. I wish I get to that opportunity sometimes to understand how the external counsel firm works. While we do work with them a lot, but I think it will be good to hear some of the insights from you as well. And I wish that I get an opportunity to do that someday. Thanks to Shivambika, I think she was the one who approached me if I can do this. I was a little hesitant at the beginning to do it, but she kind of pushed me to do it. So thanks to Dr. Kuljit and Veena, who kind of gave me an opportunity as well. So thanks to everyone at Wiki who kind of worked to get this session organized. Thanks. It has been wonderful being a part of this session. Thanks everyone.
Thank you so much, Mahi, and I echo this thanks to everybody who you mentioned on your you just mentioned. I would say Wiki is doing great work, and I think we will have more such interesting sessions coming up in times to come. So I'd request the audience to look out for the same. Thank you, Wiki, for giving me the opportunity to moderate this absolutely wonderful event and getting such great insights from Mahi. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thanks.